Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this show, do me one quick favor and leave us a 5-star rating and review. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Mark Hentemann. Mark Hentemann is an Emmy Award nominated writer, producer, and an original writer on the show Family Guy. After struggling as a starving artist, he used his first script payments to buy a duplex in Los Angeles as a hedge against the uncertainty of an entertainment career. Real estate became a passionate side hustle, and Mark has since built an $80 million multifamily portfolio in Los Angeles and Austin, Texas. He is the founder of Quantum Capital and the host of the Wild West Real Estate Podcast. Let's welcome to the show, Mark Hentemann.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Mark, thank you for coming on. I had to squint a little bit, man. I feel like I'm getting into my old age here or something. I don't know what's going on. But while I was squinting to try to read your bio, why don't you fill in the gaps a little bit about your background?
Sure. I grew up in Ohio, like yourself.
Yes, sir.
I had never set out to be a real estate investor. My passion was always to be a writer. So I moved to New York after college. I got an unpaid internship at MTV and became that proverbial starving artist. Was chronically broke, bolt awake in the middle of the night, panicked over how I was going to pay the rent the next month. We had, terrible apartment, had 20 mice living in our stove. Somehow for like 3 years, we never resolved that issue. But eventually I got hired to write on David Letterman for the Late Show with David Letterman in New York. It was, felt like a miracle to me. And then I moved out to Los Angeles and joined a new show starting up called Family Guy in, I think, 1999. And with my first payments on Family Guy from writing a couple scripts, the scars of my destitute starving artist days were still fresh, and I knew I needed to find some way to survive this business and get some kind of financial cushion or stability that would allow me to sleep at night. And so I ended up buying a duplex.
Wow. I mean, you gave us a lot just right there. I want to break it down because, first of all, one Cleveland guy to another Cleveland guy, always excited to talk to other Clevelanders. And, that starving artist, you talked about the challenges that you faced, finally getting that breakthrough, writing for David Letterman, then moving out west, writing for Family Guy, but still kind of tapping into those challenges and how you decided to use those funds. I want to come back to that because obviously that's an important part of the real estate story and what we'll talk about today. But you talked about the 20 mice in your stove and kind of just glossed over that. Did you charge these mice rent tell me more about these mice and how did they get into your home?
I think my slob roommate just would come home at night, whether it was working later out at a bar, and make like waffles at 3 a.m, and then just leave everything on the stove, like syrup and butter and everything. And then I would just hear mice all night long. Like my bedroom was right next to the kitchen, and I could hear these mice scurrying around, and, for the life of me, I never could see them. Once in a while you see them run across the floor, but when I was helpless to kill them, to get them out of there, because they were just too fast. They were too sly.
Wow. Well, listen, I can understand how that really impacted your view of what you wanted your life to be like and why you took that first check from Family Guy and decided to buy a duplex.
But you're right. That sort of the harrowing trauma of just that never-ending anxiety just was pivotal. I mean, it defined me emotionally and psychologically. moving forward. And, it was good in a lot of ways. It made me tougher, stronger, and more determined. And, it was going to be a tough challenge to break into this business and stay into this business. And I knew I had to be on it and focused and driven. And, that kind of ignited a bit of a fire under me.
Well, I mean, pain and pleasure, right? Those are the two things that drive us to make really important decisions. And for you, that pain of, not having things and kind of really slumming it to get through. And to your point, you're in a very competitive industry. I mean, Hollywood, you move, Ohio kid, you go out to New York, you move out to LA as a screenwriter. I'm sure you came across a bunch of other people who came out to Hollywood with their big hopes and dreams to be successful, and
Yep.
maybe they were serving you at Starbucks or something like that. So how did you balance that? You're working on a hit show, but you don't know it's a hit show at the time, right? You just
Yeah.
know that, it's a gig, it's a job. So you're working on this, you buy the duplex. Walk me through a little bit more about kind of your mentality and your psyche to say, all right, hey, I'm on the show, I want to write, but on the same note, I have to make sure that we've got something else taking care of the bills and helping me eat at night and not have to live with mice in my stove.
That's exactly right, though. I mean, I did not think Family Guy was going to last more than 6 months. I was pretty sure that it would be canceled, like the majority of shows. And we did get canceled. We got canceled twice in those early years. So I knew that I really needed to focus on learning my finances, understanding finances, and managing them smartly, because I didn't want to be one of those train wreck, creative types that go through this business, could never save, $10 because they just are terrible with their money. So I knew I needed a plan, and, I just didn't want that anxiety. I didn't want to live with perpetual anxiety.
So Mark, how do you do that? I mean, did you have a finance background? Did you study economics or anything that would have prepared you to be a real estate investor?
No, not at all. I think I liked real estate as a kid. I would drive past old buildings in Cleveland, and I'm sure you drove down the same streets as I did, Carnegie, Chester, going to high school. And, I just saw these things, these like a lot of like warehouses, and I don't know. I just always kind of had a visual sense, and I liked to envision what the potential was in some of these places. And I remember that from being a young kid.
Yeah. So that first duplex, walk me through your process, right? You have the check, you decide you want to buy it. Did you find this on market? How do you find the property? Walk me through. Did you run any
Sure.
kind of analysis, or walk me through that process?
Yeah, this was my process. Is we lived in this like a 1-bedroom apartment. My future wife had moved out to LA with me. She's from Cleveland as well, West Sider. Uh, but our landlord raised the rent in our apartment, and I was like, insulted by that. And we went out looking for another apartment, and maybe to try to get a little more space. And after it was on one Sunday morning, and we walked out of that open house in across the street, there was another house open house. And so we had nothing to do. So we just wandered in, and I talked to the broker hosting it. And we talked a little bit, and she said, "Why are you throwing your money away on rent when you could be putting that towards mortgage?" And my first response was, "Are you kidding me? I'm in the entertainment business. I could be out of work tomorrow and be unemployed for the next 2 years. You think I want the responsibility of a mortgage?" And she was nice, and we talked. And eventually I said, "All right, I get it. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I would love to I'm looking for that financial security, but I don't know how to find it. If you can find that for me with an investment property, I'll do it. And that's the only way I want to take on a mortgage. Don't show me any cute houses. I know what, brokers do is they fix them up, they paint them, they make them look pretty. I want something ugly that I could add value to. I don't want it to be an emotional buyer. I want pure investment, because that's what this needs to bring for me." And we parted ways. I thought I'd never hear from her again, but she called me and she said, I found the property you need to buy, but there's a catch. You need to become a landlord. And I was like, a landlord? I don't want to be a landlord. And I met her at the property, and it was, kind of a rough, very rough around the edges, 100-year-old, maybe 90-year-old at that point, duplex. And it needed a ton of TLC, but I could tell it was in a up and coming neighborhood. And I could see, I understood enough about location and different aspects of it that this property also had great architectural detail that was just completely lost, and it was all overgrown. The sellers were raising goats and chickens in the backyard in the middle of LA, and they were going to move to Kansas to dig a hole and live in an underground house off the grid. But I guess that's LA for you. But I said, yeah, let's. If you think this is a good deal, I don't have the experience to assess value or not, but I can see the potential here, and I can see the potential in the location. And she said, I think this is a good deal. I think you should go for it. And, I had to trust her on that, and I did. And it was LA. So there were 15 other buyers. We got into a bidding war. I think I offered $350,000 on this property that was listed maybe $379,000. And over the next 2 weeks, we were going up. The bidding war was escalating the price, probably like $15,000 a day. And after a couple of weeks, I had won the bidding war by paying $435,000 for this property, and thought this was a disaster. I just made a huge mistake that would probably bankrupt me.
That's got to be scary, right? To go in, you start at 350, somehow 2 weeks later, your offer is $435,000, and you're not even in a position to know whether or not the value's there. I mean, why did you run your bids up? I mean, did it get emotional and competitive at that point, or did you think the value was still much higher than that 435?
I was talking to the broker every day and analyzing it. And every day that I looked at that property, I knew that this could be dramatically better. I looked at comps. I kind of devoured the comps. And I also knew that neighborhood was really good and really on the rise, primarily because there was a village. It was called Larchmont Village that was walkable. And in LA, back with LA traffic, the ability to park your car on a Friday and just spend your weekend walking into this really charming village of cafes and restaurants and all that stuff. I thought, like, that's valuable. And this duplex could be 100 times better than it currently is. And I was checking with the broker. I'm like, is this still a good deal at 400? And she's like, I know you don't think so, but trust me, I think it is. And that was the leap of faith I had to take. And I'm grateful for her ever since. That was 20 years ago, and I'm still like, June On is her name. And I'm like, thank you, June. You got me into this thing, and you steered me right. You could have taken advantage.
No, it's awesome to hear that it worked out for that first property. Why don't you fast forward a little bit and tell us a little bit more about kind of the next acquisition and just, where things started to go from here?
Yeah, it was a turn of events in that first duplex and trying to learn real estate, in part largely because I thought I'd made such a huge mistake with this thing. I was devouring every book I could read on real estate investing and trying to learn how to do it. But I think as I owned that property, I was able to refi, get out of PMI. I was able to raise the rents and renovate that property. So I think, and then eventually sold it for, in 2005, 5 years later, I sold it for $1.27 million, which was about like a 2,000% return on my 10% down payment, which was like $43,000. And so I think what happened is a light bulb went off. Is like, this was the greatest financial event of my life. And so writing was still my dream, but real estate had become my must. I was like, this is the thing. This is what I've been dying for and didn't think existed, but it does. I can do this. concurrently with pursuing a writing career. I could do this on the side, and this is what I have to do, continuously as much as possible. So I bought maybe a fourplex and then an eightplex in LA while owning that duplex. When I sold the duplex, I had read about taxation, and we took out $500,000 tax free as our primary residence tax exclusion for a married couple. And then the other side of it, and then I also asked my CPA if I could I also 1031 exchange the other side and roll that money. And the CPA amazingly said, yes, you can do both of those things. So I also pulled out, maybe another 400,000 and bought a 14-unit building. And I was off to the races. I mean, I had already just assembled maybe like 5 multifamily properties. And I always liked multifamily from day one. Sitting in that duplex, I was looking out across the street at the fourplex. And I would say, oh man, it would be so much better to have 4 units than 2. That way, if someone moves out, I got 3 more to cover it. And there was a 6-unit next to that. I was like, oh, it'd be even better to have a 6-unit. So I had my sights on economies of scale.
No, I love it, man. And thinking about the big picture and recognizing that you can go from a 2-unit to the 4-unit to the 8-unit and really scale that portfolio. And then the fact that you had the wherewithal to talk to your CPA, understand how do you, minimize the tax implication, taking that $500,000 homeowner tax exemption, using a 1031 exchange for the balance of those proceeds, and then rolling that into the acquisition of another property sets you up. And that's the thing about that first deal. That first deal, if you do it right, if you can create equity, that is a snowball in and of itself, because you can create equity that you can then roll over into the next deal. And also you built that confidence. So you went from the guy who wasn't sure if you're going to have a job to what was going on.
Right.
You buy this duplex, and this duplex is really kind of the backbone of kind of a small portfolio that provides you the freedom, that provides you with, independent cash flow, and also lets you know that, hey, I can build this business on the side. I want to talk a little bit about that, right? Because for people listening, especially those folks who maybe don't have a business mindset, you mentioned yourself that you were more of a starving artist in Hollywood. So for those musicians, actors, writers, folks that don't have steady income, anyone with the gig economy type job, those folks who don't have a steady W-2 paycheck that's coming in the door on a predictable schedule. Talk to me about some of the strategies or best practices to invest on the side without giving up your passion. How do you focus on building that portfolio while still maintaining the passion for, your priority?
Yeah. And another thing is a great point that you mentioned about it's so key if you could make that first deal a winner. And I think what also happened to me, and I don't know if I was ever this temperament or this way, but the other thing that it did is after I sold that duplex, I had no interest in buying the dumb kind of shiny objects that people in Hollywood buy. I never cared about having a fancy car or anything. I was so excited to pump everything I had into real estate. It was before that, investing was boring to me because, you put in your 401k and you sit and watch it like inch upward, in tiny amounts. This was something that I had control over and that I could understand, and it had some complexity to it that was appealing to me, that I could, control my future. And so, everything was getting pumped into real estate, and I was passionate. It was definitely a passion for me and a devotion. I was like, I knew that whenever I got spit out of the entertainment business, that's okay with me. I'm going to do this far beyond my entertainment career. I want to do this until I'm 100. And so I was, I was working during the day, and then at nights and weekends, kind of reading and strategizing and looking, always looking around analyzing every kind of deal. And, it's kind of interesting, and go off in a little bit of a side, is I I had never heard of a podcast, a real estate podcast, maybe for the first 10 years of my investing life. And I was just investing in LA. I was like, that's where I was, and buying multifamily properties that were rough, that were maybe old. I mean, Los Angeles has a lot of 1920s and 1930s product. And I was buying that because it was cheap. It was what I could afford. And I would fix it up. And then I started hearing podcasts maybe in 2013, 2014. And just the unanimous message was, you can't invest in major cities. Like, don't even try, and never buy anything before 1980s because you're going to get in trouble. I was like, well, what? I clearly must have been, everyone's telling me I've been doing this all wrong, but I've been doing this for 13 years and had nothing but, great results.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot of broad stroke advice. And I think, it's one of those things where when you're talking to thousands of people at one time, you want to be very careful on what you say and the kind of advice, and telling people, yeah, go buy a 100-year-old property. Like, there are clearly issues that come with buying a 100-year-old property. But if you know that, you recognize that in the markets there, you can kind of navigate it. I mean, it was the same thing for us when we were living in Chicago. We were buying properties. My first property was built, I think it was an 80-year-old property when we bought it. It was 90 some years old now. And same kind of thing, it was just, you're going to buy old properties. They're going to have old property issues, and you just deal with it. So as long as you recognize that, I think it's okay. And you have to certainly recognize as well that it's different if you're buying it for yourself as an investment versus if you have like this group of investors, because now you kind of have to be mindful of their money and their investment, and there's just a different set of risks that come with that. I want to talk a little bit more about the side hustle though, right? The side hustle that could be your long-term business. But as you were building this thing out, what challenges did you face? I mean, at any point did your real estate get in the way of your day job? I know that's one of the issues or concerns that many investors have, or would-be investors have, is, well, how do I balance, being a landlord or investing in property when I do have a day job, especially if that day job is pretty demanding?
Yeah. It was somewhat challenging. I was determined to make it work, but I was getting calls, in the middle of sitting in a writer's room. I had created 2 shows while also investing. And I had to lean on third party property management. My management company, on the weekends, I would examine what they were doing, look at the numbers, but, they had to handle things, and I had to find a great property manager. And then just at nights and weekends, I was analyzing deals, and I was fortunate to find a great team. I think it took a little bit of time, as everybody does, and a little bit of trial and error, but I found, a lot of brokers that were really helpful. I found a great mortgage, debt, team, and a good insurance. I just assembled this team, and I think, I think we all liked each other, and we began working together, consistently, and they knew the challenges that I was facing on my schedule. But it was a juggling act. It was totally a juggling act. And I think there was a period when I got a show on Fox, for like a year and a half, from 2000, maybe 14 to 15, late 15, that I wasn't in buying mode. I was like, I'm running a show. I created this show. It's launching, and my real estate was a bit on hold. But obviously at the time, I think I had maybe 18 multifamily buildings, and I was keeping an eye on them and monitoring property management. But I wasn't in buying mode.
I think too, like, understanding the team is what I heard you say, is that when you're scaling up like that, you have to recognize your limitations, and building a team in place that can help oversee it, help grow it, and relinquishing some of that. If you're a busy professional, or you're someone who you can't predict your schedule, you're going to need to rely on someone. So whether that is a property manager, whether that is an operator, or whoever else you're using, a turnkey provider, you're going to need to lean on someone. So spend your time evaluating those individuals and getting to know them and vetting them and making sure that you can collaborate with them. That's a great way to grow. So don't use that as an excuse that you don't have time. You just need to find people who do have time to oversee the properties and manage it efficiently. So you scaled a portfolio. I mean, we talked in your bio that you now have a portfolio worth over $80 million. I know a lot of that is your own personal portfolio, but you are working with other people now too. Talk to us about kind of the way you expanded going from just to LA and your personal portfolio to now I know you have some stuff in Texas as well.
Sure. Yes, I was growing, and what really enabled me to do this concurrently with a entertainment career is finding great property management. And it took me cycling through maybe 5 different management companies before I found one that was consistently dependable, and that I could communicate with and trust, because property management is a messy business and it's not a profitable business. And as a result, it's not a hugely profitable business. It's got a ton of headaches. So as a result, you don't get really, really great management companies. So you got to really watch who you're hiring. And I needed a great one. I knew that I needed a top flight property management company that would allow me to, step away when I had to. But what was your question? Was, oh, how did I evolve and expand? Yeah, I never wavered in my consistent commitment to multifamily, and I was buying everything I could in LA. And then eventually, when I got to a certain number of properties, I realized I really should get a second market. I really should diversify. And I spent probably 2 years analyzing markets. I wanted to find something with growth, population growth, tech. I wanted a tech city. I wanted job growth, income growth. I also wanted barriers to entry, because I thought that was one of the best advantages that LA had, is it was one of the most difficult cities to build new product. And as a result, there was never enough product, which, prevented rents from sliding or encountering oversaturation. So I eventually I zeroed in on Austin, Texas, and Salt Lake City were the two cities that I thought would be a good second market for me. And both of them were easy to get to from LA, and ultimately pulled the trigger on Austin. And now I've bought, I think, close to 200 units there in the past couple of years. And it's been great. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you got over 100 units there, a couple of hundred units you said in Austin, Texas. And I know you started to evolve from just doing your own deals to now kind of getting other folks to come on board. Talk to me a little bit about that process as far as telling other folks about what you're doing and bringing on investors.
Yeah. When I started getting into to real estate with the Duplex, I was around other writers all day, and I became like an evangelist to all of them. I'm like, you gotta get it. You gotta buy a property. You gotta be smart with your money. Don't give it to the money managers that are probably ripping you off. And they all kind of agreed, and they admired what I was doing, but strangely, none of them would do it on their own. And eventually, I think maybe 5 years into my investing, they were all like, I was telling them to buy a property, and they said, well, you won't stop talking about this. Why don't you find a property and we'll give you money? And so I did that with my first one was ironically 2008, and we bought right after we removed contingencies. Lehman Brothers collapsed along with Bear Stearns and plunged into the global recession with my five investors and my 5 colleagues and smartasses that I thought would never let me hear the end of it if I lost their money. But luckily we bought like a B B minus property. Rents were low, and we weathered it. It was not fun. It was nerve wracking, but to credit or a testament to the resilience of multifamily, especially like workforce multifamily, is our rents were going up during the recession because people were maybe getting foreclosed on and moving into apartments. And then at the same time, people in A class or better product were moving down because this was more affordable. So there was competition for every unit that ever became vacant.
No, it's great to hear. I mean, listen, it's always good that you're able to work through that with your investors, especially given that time frame. So good to hear that, multifamily, at least from your investments, it proved to be kind of a good shelter through that storm to help your investors get through. And whether they were giving you crap and joking with you, I think they are all happy that they had funds with you during that time versus with Lehman Brothers or some of these other, investment houses at that time frame, right? So there's got to be some advantages there.
I think one of the best things I heard was so I sold that property. We sold that property in 2015, and I think everybody tripled their money. But one of the best things, most gratifying things to hear is one of the guys that he's a writer and not really he doesn't really pay attention to finances, and he went back to like a money manager that's handling all of his finances because he just doesn't want to deal with it. But he told me like a year ago, he's like, oh, by the way, my money manager, he said, whoever you invested in that real estate deal with, do more of that because that's amazing. And I was like, I thought all those money managers were just taking advantage of real estate people. And it made me feel good. I was like, oh, all right, maybe they're not, maybe there's a good guy amongst them who told the truth.
That's awesome. It's good to hear. Hey, Mark, before we transition to our Bullseye Round, I want to ask this question from someone who spends all their time creating content. So a lot of listeners right now are interested in the marketing aspect. Maybe they're writing articles or doing podcasts or blogs or whatever the case may be to try to build their network or try to connect with other maybe potential investors or find deals. As a writer, as someone who is creating content every day, all the time, give us some tips to just kind of stay creative and stay productive, pumping out content.
I think creativity is a discipline more than it is an art. I think you get up, you sit down and you write, and you don't expect it to be great. You're not expecting whatever's flowing from you to be brilliant. I think you just do it regardless, and you edit yourself. You go back through it, maybe 5 times, maybe 10, maybe 20 times. I mean, if I'm writing a script, I'm constantly going through it. Other things, tips, if people are writing blog posts, story is important. I was always a critic of stories entering the business. I thought like, oh, if it's funny, it doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. But, storytelling has this kind of magical psychological effect on humans. And if you can make a point about real estate or about investing and couch it in a story, people will retain it. I think science shows that they'll retain it like 20 times or 20 times more likely to remember a story than they are facts. I don't know if those
there you go.
But yeah,
no, it's very powerful. So focus on the storytelling, and then you talked about it being more of a discipline. You guys are in the writer's room. I assume in the writer's room, part of that process is being open to critiques and having your work critiqued by others. What have you learned in response to creating content from having to go out, whatever you write, putting in front of how many other people and letting them just open up with whatever critiques they have on your work? What have you learned from that?
Oh yeah, it was terrifying because I am inherently introverted, and I was always holed up in my room, writing stuff as a kid and even as an adult. And when I had to go in my first writing rooms, and I think my first one was David Letterman. And I think like, it was like 10 people in that room. And I think 8 of them had gone to Harvard and worked on the Harvard Lampoon. They all had like a shelf of 15 Emmys. I was terrified to open my mouth because I thought it would be stupid. Whatever I said was, I would never be able to like say anything worthwhile. I think being in the writer's room, you just gotta, have some guts, have some trust in yourself and pitch, kind of formulate a pitch in your head, think about it, and just throw it out there. And it's fun. I love going to work every day now. I think these are my closest friends, and we all know each other, and we laugh all day long. And I don't think we ever laugh at the jokes we pitch. We just make fun of each other relentlessly.
Love it. Love it. Just putting yourself out there. And I would say to translate that for others, it's really, you can't be afraid of how people are going to respond, right? You've got to be a bit vulnerable, but also if there's a way to take that criticism and create a better product, then ultimately that's the goal, right? The goal is not to rip you apart. The goal is to make the best product possible. So as you're creating content, as you're, launching podcasts or whatever the case may be open to some constructive feedback that can allow you to put together a better product.
100%. Yeah. The sort of natural inclination is to, be defensive when somebody tries to give you constructive criticism. I think you got to be totally open to it. And you got to recognize that you have a certain tunnel vision creatively, and getting outside feedback. You don't have to take all of it, but if you can find people that you trust, that's any script that I will ever write. I'll show it to someone and say, hey, someone I trust, like, you've got good judgment. Tell me what I need to fix. And I know I'm blind to it, but I think it's good. I think it's all great. Actually, that's not the truth. I think everything that I write is not good, but I can't wait to get other people's feedback. And I don't want to be one of those writers that insists on what they wrote was great and not being open to feedback, because I think I've seen so many bad TV shows, bad movies created when an auteur or like a famous director or someone gets too powerful and they stop taking other people's feedback.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thanks for that feedback. Let's move on to our Bullseye Round. You ready?
All right.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
I think it was all those punches in the face that I got trying to break in to the business. I think, when that happens, when you go through those experiences, they're traumatizing at the time, but, they'll either break you in half or you'll come away way more determined and way more resilient than you once were. So I think it was in New York, destitute. I remember, you're a Chicago guy. I remember that Michael Jordan story that he got cut from his sophomore basketball team, and he went home and cried. And then he became the greatest basketball player possibly ever. It's like those rejections. He probably wouldn't have reached the heights he did if he didn't have that experience. Those experiences are gold.
Absolutely. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Lately I like Appfolio. It's the platform that we do syndications on, and it just seems it's organized. I think there are other good ones out there, but it's been a lifesaver for us, and it really helpful.
Give me a book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I think Art of Performance. The Art of Performance. It was written by a guy, Joran de Vlaanderen, and it was a great examination of the science of performance. And the whole thesis of the book was that talent almost doesn't exist. And I'm in a field where, everybody talks about people are born talented. It's developed. And the argument was that it's developed. And he a lot of his examples were like chess or, Olympic performance. And maybe, I think in my world, and I loved reading it. It was full of great insights. And then I came away with, I was like, well, does that apply to comedy? Because so many of the people that I'm around, they all are different. They're all damaged in some different way that makes them really funny with a very specific voice. And, I'm curious if that could be developed.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
A daily habit. I've gotten into, a lot during this pandemic is I've gotten into meditation. I've always kind of dabbled with it. I think mindset is everything. And so it's been a fixation of mine for a while, but it's just a recent addition that, I think it changes your brain when you do it consistently. And I think it allows you to tap more areas of your brain.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
When I was starting out, that's a good question. What do I wish when I knew when I was starting out? Obviously the easy answers are, I wish I got into real estate quickly, and I don't know that I would have had any funds to do so any earlier. But I don't know. I guess maybe go into Texas a little earlier. Catch the Austin. I've had great success in the Austin market. That's what I wish I knew earlier. I wish I would have ridden some of that growth earlier.
What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious about the economy, as many people probably are. But yeah, I'm curious about trying to read, and I'm trying to devour everything that I can and get a read on where we're going. And it's exciting. It's exciting as well, as much as it is uncertain.
And Mark, you're out there in LA, as we've talked about. Give me the best place to grab a bite out in LA.
You know what I'm dying to have open it up, and I'm embarrassed to say a chain, but I have 3 little girls, and we go into this little village, and it's the village we started this podcast with. I now have come full circle. I'm in our 3rd house, and I'm still near that Larchmont village, and I take my little girls and we go into Le Pan Quotidien, and the people there are the best. They're so nice. And that's our Saturday morning breakfast. And I'm excited to do that.
Listen, you're going to say a chain. That's a good chain. That's not like you're going to say like Taco Bell or something like that.
Right.
Not bad at all. Well, listen, Mark, good talking to you, man. I love hearing your story, especially as a starving artist, and how you kind of turned to real estate to make sure you had more of a foundation so you could really pursue your passion. I think that's just a great story that many people can extract value from, and try to understand that real estate, it can be a wealth driver, or it could just be a stabilizer if you are looking to pursue other things or other passions in your life. You host a podcast. We didn't get to talk too much about it today. Maybe you could give listeners a little bit more information about the Wild Real Estate Podcast.
Sure. It's called the Wild West Real Estate Podcast. And it's mostly focused on multifamily and focused on the whole country, all kinds of different strategies. But I felt like there was a space for in the podcast universe for a show that talked at least partially about investing in big cities, big coastal cities that are intimidating to a lot of people. And, I always thought, I know my handyman, bought a garage and now he's got, 6 properties in LA. I think people can do it. It's doable.
No, I love it. We'll definitely make sure we link to that. Mark, it's great talking to you today. For listeners who want to get in touch, check out the podcast, learn a little bit more about what you do. What is the best way to get in touch?
Sure. You could check out our website, which is quantumcapitalins.com. markinc.com. And you could reach out to me at, I'll give you my email address. It's markhentemann at me.com, me.com. And, happy to chat or answer any questions or help in any way.
Mark, thank you again for coming on Target Market Insights. We'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Thanks, John.